It is good to be with you this morning for a number of reasons. One, because you're good listeners, and I know that about you, and it's always better to preach to good listeners, but also because it's the first Sunday of Advent, which is also always a meaningful time to worship, to preach, to hear the word of the Lord. And so thank you, Pastor Steve, for choosing this week to be on vacation. And we've got the prophet to look at today. And if you'll bear with me through some of the more complicated parts, I think you'll find that the hope and good news of a God who loves us will reach all of us this morning. A few years ago, when he was about 4 years old, I watched my young nephew, Parker, watch that old classic movie, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It came to the scene where Willy Wonka leads the 5 golden ticket winners and their guests into the chocolate room. My nephew's eyes and mouth did exactly what those entering the chocolate factory did. They opened wide in surprise and delight as they took in the chocolate river, complete with a chocolate waterfall. He saw large gummy bears and round hard candies growing from the trees, the sweet whipped sauce of the mushrooms, and the edible flowers lining the walkway. Gene Wilder, who plays Willy Wonka, had barely begun to sing, "Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination." And the golden ticket winners and their guests eagerly explored with eyes and tongues their sweet surroundings. Parker then looked at me with a huge smile on his face and said with overwhelming excitement as he pointed at the TV, "I want to go there." Unknowingly, I think he licked his lips as his eyes took in a candy land beyond his wildest dreams. It was a land flowing with the tastiest forms of sugar, offered freely to the visitors to eat whatever they desired. And at first glimpse, Parker wanted to go there himself and visit. Right? This candy land was so much better than any candy aisle that he had ever been in. And on this first Sunday of Advent, the first Sunday of our Christian calendar, it's as if the prophet Isaiah will sing to us the same words. "Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination." Isaiah, however, does not offer us a land with delights for our taste buds. He speaks instead to the deeper longings of our hearts. He speaks to our Advent longings for a world made right, for all that is crooked to be made straight, for all that is dark to be enlightened, for our broken human relationships to find that elusive restoration. The prophet gives us images that at first seem laughable, implausible, completely foreign if we are to hear them right. Isaiah will give us in our 4-week Advent season pictures of life on planet Earth that are pure imagination. Isaiah's holy inventiveness will stretch our thoughts toward a fantasy we might not have come up with on our own. Right? In the same way that my nephew had been to a candy aisle but had not yet seen a candy land, so the prophet takes us to a place we have not been before. He gives us a picture of a way of life in God's world that is not our default practice. He paints for us a world we have not experienced before. And before I read today's passage vision in Isaiah chapter 2, I want to make sure we know the context of Isaiah chapter 1 and to whom this improbable vision comes. In chapter 1, the prophet speaks a word of judgment from God on Jerusalem and Judah, right? So the gloomy part is in chapter 1, not in chapter 2. God's complaint is that he has reared these children. He has raised them, and they turned against him. And because of their disobedience, strangers are devouring their land in plain sight. Here's the problem. Among their leaders, everyone loves a bribe and pursues gifts. They don't defend the orphan. The widow's cause never reaches them. They have fallen victim to the lesser loves of comfort and selfish desire. They are filled with national pride in what they can do. Their religious practice is entirely self-serving. They should be trusting God, but they have instead said, "We can do it all ourselves." Caught in the power plays of neighboring nations, Egypt and Assyria, the people of God are feeling the judgment of God. Destruction is at their doorstep. It is in the midst of these vexing and unending problems that we hear this purely imaginative picture that the prophet relays in Isaiah chapter 2. So listen to this pipe dream, the unlikely good news, the promises and intentions of God that Isaiah paints for these errant children of God with his words. Reading from Isaiah chapter 2. This is what Isaiah, Amoz's son, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house will be the highest of mountains. It will be lifted above the hills. People will stream to it. Many nations will go and say, "Come, let's go to the Lord's mountain, to the house of Jacob's God, so that he may teach us his ways and we may walk in God's path. Instruction will come from Zion, the Lord's word from Jerusalem. God will judge between the nations and settle disputes of mighty nations. Then they will beat their swords into iron plows and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation. They will no longer learn how to make war. Come, house of Jacob, let's walk by the Lord's light." This is the word of God for the people of God. The prophet's opening image is enough to get their attention. It's unexpected and outrageous. The mountain of the Lord's house, the temple, Jerusalem, the holy city, the place where God dwells among his people, is lifted high above all mountains and hills. It is raised in importance, and everyone can see its rightful place. And all of the nations' world is coming to them. All of the nations of the world are coming to them. No longer do the nations just fly over or pass through. They make Jerusalem their destination. They come to God's holy people. The nations now seek them out, and they arrive from every direction to get to Jerusalem. And this, to Israel's people and leaders, this is not reality, right? This is not the way things currently are at all. This is pure imagination. But it's not for Jerusalem's kings and religious leaders to feel pride or arrogance or to be smug about this pictured importance of themselves as a global destination. The nations are flocking to Jerusalem not for them, not because of their greatness, but because this is the location where God has chosen to be found, and they want to be where God is. The nations come, not to adopt Israel's culture, but to learn God's ways, to be in God's presence. And the peoples of the earth don't just want God's laws in their minds. They want God's ways to be so embedded in their lives that they flow easily from their hands and feet, in their words and all their actions. The nations arrive in the holy city because they want to walk the walk, not just think the thoughts or talk the talk of God's ways. They come seeking God. They come to embrace God's ways in everyday life. And this was kind of the point from the beginning, but this is a vision beyond anything that Jerusalem has been able to figure out for themselves. It would be a dream. Just like if our whole community streamed to us to join us in worship next Sunday, not because they liked our style or our culture or our songs, but because they want to learn the ways of our God, right? Pure imagination, a laughable idea, preposterous, right? We are not prepared for that chair problem. The holy city of Jerusalem might currently be a wayward mess of unfaithfulness and selfish desires, but the prophet's picture says that this city is not disqualified from God's purposes. God's presence will be found in Jerusalem. God's instruction will go out from Zion. God will be there. God's word will go out, and it will be met with eagerness by the nations. For a city that should be, but isn't, seeking God's ways, who doesn't make any lists of the world's movers and shakers, this is pure imagination. A dream, a possibility too good to be true, and the minds of Isaiah's listeners have to be stretched to imagine it all. And one of the reasons we are told that the people of the world arrive here is because God is sitting on the throne. God is acting as judge, sorting out all the complicated messes in which nations and peoples can get themselves caught. Right? On every level of human relationship, we get entangled. Right? One side thinks this is right and fair, and the other side cries, bias, and then proposes an equally biased alternative, right? It happens in marriages and families and neighborhoods, in towns large and small, within states, in nations, and between nations. It's all part of our human predicament. What has been decided isn't fair, so we take things into our own hands to even the score, which starts a cycle of retaliation that firmly separates us in stalemates that we do not know how to soften. We get nervous about how these disputes and arguments between us are going to be settled, don't we? Will the powers that be understand this dynamic or the implications of this, or just how violated this made me feel? Are the courts of law or public opinion partial? Can they be trusted? And in the midst of all these complex realities that we face in a broken world, the prophet takes us beyond pointing to God on the throne, settling these disputes in ways that are fair and just for everyone. Wouldn't that make such a big difference? God sees, God hears, God knows. And so God can delineate what is fair and just in ways that human beings cannot. And as the nations show up, allowing God to settle their most complicated disputes, they don't seek an appeal because God has judged fairly. At these important junctures, where things are about to get to an unrepairable state, God's wisdom is sought, and God can help. With God on the throne doing all of the arbitrating, and because the people of the world do not need to settle miscarriages of justice themselves, you know what? The nations of the world no longer need armies or weapons or war schools to ensure a favorable justice or to prevent a violation. Can you imagine? With God as the judge, no one will need to settle the score, to pay back in kind, to demand an eye for the eye that they lost. The consequence is that the nation's supply of weapons sits neglected and unused in the back shed, right? The tools of war aren't needed to get even anymore. There's no use for them. And finally, somebody looks at that deserted arsenal and thinks, we really should find a new purpose for these. We no longer need them as they are, but maybe these weapons for destruction can be remade, physically converted, to become instead instruments of life. Maybe they can turn the soil so seeds can be planted, or prune back the fruit trees so that they can produce next year's fruit. So they become tools that can do the opposite of what they were created for, transforming all of our former battlefields into gardens that feed and give life. When you no longer need to defend yourself from your neighbor, you can grow some vegetables to feed her. Swords become plowshares, spears are remade into pruning hooks. The prophet transports us to a place of purely imagined peace, beyond our wildest dreams, but fulfilling our deepest of longings. Can you imagine it? Come and look around at this vision where all are seeking God's ways and all our harsh words and actions can disappear so that a thriving wholeness takes its place. Stretching into back alleys and deep, dark corners, and even into all those forgotten about places. Imagine a place where all our broken relationships heal, where conversations aren't fueled by conflict, but instead build understanding, where all the orphans and widows are adopted into families, where all of our differences do not separate us. Can you imagine? In a divided nation and a war-torn world, all our competitive and violent relationships transformed into peaceful bonds? All that energy we spend being suspicious of others or causing them physical or emotional damage or holding grudges, all of it is replaced in God's mercy with time and energy set free to heal and care and comfort and sustain. All our harsh actions, and we have come up with so many of them, are replaced with caring and feeding and making sure that our neighbor has what they need in order to live and to thrive. Friends, this vision of harmony from the prophet is sweet and elusive. And doesn't it make Willy Wonka's chocolate factory pale in comparison? This is the peace that God desires for God's world. This is God's intentions for us, manifested in everyday human life. This is God's promise of wholeness and thriving and shalom. The prophet's vision of what will be comes crashing into our heads, and it can only be compared into our heads that can only comprehend what is. It's not just peace and comfort for some, it's peace and comfort for all, filling in all of those places in between us. No steps away from each other in fear and suspicion, but steps towards each other in responsibility and kinship. And it seems so far-fetched, right, in light of life as we too often know it. What would you do with all of your time if you didn't need to argue or fight or avoid or be suspicious? If you could spend all of your time building what is needed, meeting what is lacking, and living in peace, what would you choose to do? So I wonder this morning if anyone is caught by this vision of pure imagination. I wonder if anyone wants to respond to the prophet like my nephew, licking your lips in anticipation. I want to go there. Do you want to go to this place of sturdy peace, where God is with us, where love triumphs over all the ugliness we humans can produce, where life is how God intended? A garden of life, instead of all of our needless, bloody battlefields. Do you want to go to Isaiah's vision of a world made new? Because then comes Isaiah's invitation. It's like the prophet has a golden ticket for us so that we may go to this world of delights that has so often eluded us. It's like he's reminding us of the golden ticket we already have been given by God. He says, "Come, let us walk in the light of the Lord." The ones who are not deserving, who should have figured things out a long time ago, but didn't. The ones failing at being the people of God. They are invited into this sheer gift, which is a wonderland of peace. For the goodness of God in the future has a way of shining toward us in the present. The golden ticket's not just an entry pass. It's the Lord's ways, the instruction God has already given us that we might be people of peace, living in communities of shalom. This is what Jesus taught us, showing us how to turn our cheeks, to go the extra mile, to bend down and serve, even if it meant scrubbing others' dirty toes. And Jesus showed us how that instrument of death, the cross, could be twisted instead into a powerful symbol for life. In Advent, we stir up all of these visions and longings that seem like pure imagination. We know we need a Savior. We are waiting and waiting for salvation. We can't save ourselves. We can't secure God's glorious future on our own, and we know it. But we wait for God's future promises to break into the present, like light illuminating the darkness. We long and we yearn and we ache to be part of a peace like this. Today, as we begin this holy season of longing and waiting, we catch a glimpse of this purely imagined vision for life on planet Earth, and we hear the invitation that accompanies it. Imagine the peoples of the world, friend and foe, from all nations, speaking a symphony of language. They will all say, "Come, let us go to the house of the Lord, that we might learn God's ways." They will learn from God the ways of peace. Friends, we too are invited. It's not just back then and there, it's here and now. On us, God's light has begun to shine and will continue to shine. So with the peace of God thoroughly soaking our imaginations, the Advent invitation arrives. Come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Don't you want to go there?
I invite you all to just sit and listen to this song. As Isaiah invites us to imagine a world shaped by God's peace instead of violence, by trust instead of fear. As we sit and listen, let this be our prayer, that God will lead us out of the chaos into the world of this world into the still waters of his kingdom. Great